All right. So, Kaia, why should the listeners tune into the episode today?
Well, we all have the capacity to heal and to reach our ultimate state of joy. How do we do that? Let's talk about it.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the NuroFlex podcast. I am your host, Toby Passman. If you guys are interested in doing some brain hacking and brain training, NuroFlex is currently offering QEEG brain mapping assessments and targeted neuromodulation sessions using neurofeedback, neurostimulation, audiovisual entrainment, and brain photobiomodulation to individuals in the Fort Lauderdale and Miami area. So if that's something that interests you, go ahead and check out neuroflex.com to learn more, or shoot me an email, toby@neuroflex.com. On to today's episode, we have a very special guest, Kaia Roman. Today, Kaia wears many hats, including writer, producer, investor, philanthropist, and entrepreneur, merging 20 years of brand experience work in Silicon Valley with her neuroscience and mindfulness research and training. Kaia is an intrepid entrepreneur and passionate advocate for people, projects, and products working towards a better world. So, Kaia, really excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, tell me a little about kind of your, that what I mentioned in your bio, that merging the brand experience work in Silicon Valley kind of with more the mindfulness and neuroscience stuff. Can you kind of walk me through the journey of your career and kind of how you've gotten to the point that you are today?
Yeah, sure. Okay, let me see how I can condense that into 20 years into a tiny nutshell. So I'm based in Silicon Valley, and since the late 90s, I've been working with tech companies and PR and marketing. And I've been an entrepreneur. I've started many businesses, been involved with many startups. A lot of writing, ghostwriting for CEOs and companies, and I really thrive in that world. But like many people, I think, in all of our hero's journey, we all reach this arc where we're like, outwardly, we have everything that society tells us that we should have: success, marriage, children, blah, 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 but we're still not fulfilled. And for me, it kind of all came crashing down when I started an epigenetic software business that was a little ahead of its time and did not go as planned. And following the sort of forced sale of that, I needed to just reevaluate my life. And that is where my book, The Joy Plan, came from. I decided to dedicate 30 days to just focusing on my own joy, using this theory that when you focus just on joy, you can change the neural pathways in your brain. And when you change the neural pathways, you can actually change what you're focusing on and change your outward reality. So I did it as an experiment. I ended up, just like writing a lot of notes about what I was doing. It turned into a book, which became a bestseller, was featured on the Today Show for a whole week. And that really came out of a whole bunch of research that I had done in mindfulness. I'm a certified mindfulness instructor, taught mindfulness in an elementary school for 5 years, as well as in tech companies with CEOs and executive teams, using the same techniques I used with elementary school students. And it came out of a lot of my neuroscience research that, I was able to thankfully learn through working with a bunch of incredible doctors and researchers while I was building the epigenetic software. Since that book, The Joy Plan, came out in 2017, at that time, I was a journalist. I was writing for Mind Body Green, Huffington Post, a number of other publications. I had an audience in the millions, and I was considered like an influencer. And when companies and products think that you might write about them, they offer you all kinds of things for free. So one of the things that I was offered for free was a trip to Costa Rica to enjoy a week at this beautiful resort. If I would write about my experience, it was like yoga, life coaching, healthy food, plant medicine. And I was like, oh, cool, plant medicine, like, ginger, garlic, like I like plants, I'm a vegan, that sounds good. Little did I know that the plant medicine was ayahuasca, and that 5 years ago, I would have my first psychedelic experience and it would literally blow my mind. And I realized after that experience that everything that I had been writing about in the Joy Plan and teaching and my mindfulness training would be so much more effective if people had a reset first, because it's so difficult to change habits otherwise. And really, it's all, I mean, you work with brain mapping and all of these brain frequencies that, we want to harness neuroplasticity to be able to change those habits. And that's what these psychedelic compounds do. So after that experience, I really shifted my focus as an entrepreneur into working in the psychedelic medicine industry, which now I am doing in a few different ways. I helped found a at-home ketamine treatment company, which is ketamine is the only, federally legal psychedelic, and I hope to speak about that. I'm also the vice president of a company called Psychoceutical, which is doing R&D into psychedelic medicine delivery methods and medicines for the pharmaceutical industry for when the laws change, and some of them that are based on ketamine, so they already are legal. And I'm also a documentary film producer working on a couple of really exciting projects to, bring some of this information forward in a big way to a mainstream audience. So hopefully that encapsulates everything as quickly as I can.
Yeah, there's so much that I want to ask off of that, but I guess first, kind of starting off with the Joy Plan, like in your research and mindfulness training, like what are some of the key elements that were central tenets to that book?
Yeah, what I like to explain is this concept of neuroplasticity. Just looking for a piece of paper that I can fold here. So I talk about neural pathways, and neural pathways are like highways that your brain travels on because they're familiar. It goes on that same pathway over and over and over again. It's a habit in your brain. Like, you're driving to the gym, you get there, you realize you got there, you don't even remember driving there. And when you're first forming a neural pathway, imagine you're folding a piece of paper. You have to really line up the creases and be intentional about it and, carefully get it all right. Okay. But then the second time you go to fold those creases, it just goes automatically because the creases are already there. So neural pathways are like that for us. They're habitual patterns in our brain. And some of them are very positive. Maybe you have, a neural pathway around every morning you get up, you do your gratitude practice, or you eat a certain healthy way. But some of our neural pathways that some of us have formed can be very detrimental to us, especially those of us, who might suffer from anxiety or negative thoughts or intrusive thoughts or depression, even. These are neural pathways. And what I talked about in the Joy Plan is techniques for changing those neural pathways. So some of them are mindfulness techniques. Some of them are techniques of using our five senses. Some of them are just like practices that you can do every day to change. A lot of it is about changing your thought patterns. So recognizing the thought patterns that you have and then being very intentional about switching them. Now, again, I just want to reiterate that when I wrote that book, which was really like almost 8 years ago now, I didn't know about psychedelics. And what I love about psychedelics, and all the compounds are so different, and I've experimented, I consider myself to be a biohacker, so I've experimented with almost all of them. But what they really all have in common is that they create this state of neurogenesis. So neurogenesis is when there's a burst of new dendrites, which are the endings on the end of the neurons, and a whole bunch of new neurons in the brain. So these are now already like fresh baby a fresh baby brain that are ready to be connected and form these new neural pathways after the psychedelic experience. So all these practices that I talk about in the Joy Plan are going to be so much more effective to put in place if you are in a state of neurogenesis. It's not required, but it definitely will give you a heads up, to be more effective in creating joy. The other thing that I want to mention, just on the subject of joy, which is my favorite subject, is that joy and happiness are not the same thing. Scientists have actually found that happiness is an experience that we have in our prefrontal cortex. So this is the area of the brain right behind the forehead. It's very temporary. It comes and goes. It's more like stimulated by external factors. You eat something yummy, somebody gives you a compliment, you feel happy, and then it passes. Happiness stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, which is the excitation nervous system. It's more exciting than relaxing. Whereas joy is experienced in the limbic system. This is the deeper mid part of the brain, and it's more of a emotional state that is steady and constant regardless of external circumstances. And it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and relax aspect of our nervous system. And it is something that you can train your brain to be in that state on a perpetual basis. So I feel like it's an important distinction to make, because nobody's going to be happy all the time, but we can train our brains to default to a state of joy.
Right. And I was just connecting it too to like different, different drugs, recreational drugs, and also psychedelics, where it's like there's plenty of drugs that will give people a temporary kind of burst of happiness, right? That's very
Mm.
transitory. It's going to wear off
Hmm.
once the drug wears off, and often leave people in a much worse state than they were to begin with. Whereas with psychedelics, some of the research I've been reading about, say like psilocybin, able to, still kind of help people's depressive symptoms even like after a year after like a
Yeah.
single dose. It just seems like that is much more facilitating that sort of long-term joy. That do you see that sort of connection too?
I do. A lot of this comes down to the various neurotransmitters in our brain. So, there are certain things that you can do, whether it's a drug or looking at social media, or all kinds of things that stimulate dopamine, and that dopamine will give you an instant hit of maybe what you experience as happiness, but it comes and goes, and when the dopamine drops, you don't feel good. And depression, many researchers say that chronic depression is just a lack of dopamine. So, ideally, what we want to get ourselves into a state of joy is more of a steady state of dopamine and serotonin and endorphins and all these good yummy hormones and neurotransmitters. And I find the research on especially microdosing psilocybin to be incredibly promising. I mean, I'm super excited about the recent study that came out comparing antidepressants and microdosing psilocybin over a long period of time on thousands of subjects, and finding that the psilocybin was at least as effective, if not more effective, than the antidepressants. Because what's happening is it's changing the brain chemistry over time. It's changing those receptors, so you're getting a more steady stream of the dopamine and the serotonin, and it's creating an ongoing state of neuroplasticity. So you have an ongoing opportunity to be reinforcing those neural pathways that you want to reinforce. I do want to say that, psychedelics are not a panacea, and not just like you take it and then that's all you have to do. It really has to go hand in hand with those daily practices, what people call integration. Let's say if you have a major like flood dose psychedelic experience, then there's a process of integration that's very important to do afterwards, or even while you're microdosing, to be able to form the neural pathways in the way that you want to create the state that you want to be experiencing. You need to be putting those right practices into place for the neural pathways to be formed in the way that you want them to be.
Definitely so. Yeah. And Kaya, I wanted to ask you about, so you mentioned before that, you wrote the joy plan before actually having your first psychedelic experience, but, it sounds like you jumped straight into the deep end with going into the ayahuasca. And I just wanted to kind of hear about what, your experience with that and how that kind of like shaped your thoughts around kind of like neuroplasticity and your ability to change and rewire your own brain, and then how everyone else's brain can also be rewired in, that same kind of way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like I said, I wouldn't recommend doing ayahuasca the way I did, which was I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. Um, so I definitely jumped into the deep end. And that experience and all psychedelic experiences are so very different for each person. It's such an individualized, it's like, a divinely designed, perfect experience for each person. But there are certain common threads I find, a lot of times people who've experienced trauma, like I certainly have, and most of us have, if you're human, you will end up going back and re-examining or re-experiencing that trauma and seeing it from a different perspective, and being able to access healing through the psychedelic experience. Many people call it, like 10 years of therapy in one night. So the ayahuasca retreat that I went to, it was 4 ayahuasca ceremonies in a row over the course of a week. And I think that, it was able to really hit me hard to examine all this trauma and see things from a different perspective. And also, another really cosmic or common theme is this like cosmic connection with a higher power or some kind of collective consciousness that we're all connected to. That's very beautiful and very reassuring. And I mean, a lot of people have the experience of like a dying or an ego death sort of experience, and then they realize that that's actually really beautiful, and feel like, there's something bigger and more magical going on here. So I got all of it. I definitely got like all the things. It was super, super amazing. I was able to heal some past trauma. I actually got some physical healing from some injuries in my body. And I just came out of it feeling like really connected to a higher purpose, to a higher power. And then my scientific curious side just went super hard into the research, like, okay, what just happened? What was that? What did it do to my brain? And that's how I got particularly fascinated about the effect of psychedelics on the brain. And then I started trying other compounds and seeing how they were the same or how they were different. What kind of a experience would I have? What kind of after effect would I have? What would be the best integration plan? I mean, I really took it on because I'm just an intrepid researcher, so I really took it on in that way, and that led me on my journey. And I want to mention that, ayahuasca is not federally legal in the United States, but ketamine is. And ketamine is not really the same as, say, ayahuasca or Ibogaine or DMT or some of these traditional psychedelics that can create like visions and hallucinogenic experiences. Ketamine is a dissociative, but it is legal. And the way that it is being used, that it's been studied by, Yale School of Medicine and Johns Hopkins and a lot of like very reputable institutions to treat treatment-resistant depression, anxiety, PTSD. It's a super highly effective, but yet extremely gentle and generally very beautiful and very positive and very light and very short experience. And so I realized that, I mean, I took many, many, many people to ayahuasca ceremonies for years, down in Costa Rica, and then also at a Native American reservation where they're legal, here near Silicon Valley. However, I just realized, that's not super accessible to everyone. But ketamine is. Ketamine is something that if, people are suffering with their mental health, it is a very accessible treatment that is really highly effective, that has many of the same neurogenesis effects as all the other psychedelics. So, that's why I went into starting an at-home ketamine treatment company.
Right. And that's a perfect segue, because I wanted to ask you about KetamineMD, and just can you tell me about like, it seems like people may have been, may have seen kind of like the ketamine clinics sprout up a little bit in the past few years, doing infusions, but this seems like this whole new paradigm of being able to actually do, one of these kind of psychedelics at home with, the facilitation and alongside just, medical providers. Like what can you tell me
Yeah.
about just the whole treatment plan?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for asking. So, after my ayahuasca journeys and then some other psychedelic journeys, I learned about ketamine. And I had my first ketamine experiences with infusions in a clinic. It was very profound. It helped me through a difficult time. I was going through a divorce. It, really helped me during that time. And I liked that it was something that I could do easily in this country. I didn't have to go to Costa Rica to do it. Um, but then the pandemic happened, and most of the ketamine clinics in the country had to shut down. And so I was in touch with Warren Gumpel and Zappy Zaplin, dear friends of mine who've been in the ketamine industry for many years. And they had a concept to start an at-home ketamine treatment company, which was a perfect concept to bring to me because I was involved with Doctor on Demand, which was one of the very first telemedicine companies, based here in Silicon Valley. And I was like, okay, guys, I know how to do this. Let's do this. And it was a fun process that we did during the pandemic of designing, like, how do we create an at-home ketamine experience that's going to be safe, that's going to bring all the best aspects of treatment that you receive in a clinic, but make it so that people can do it at home. And even if it's not during a pandemic, people who are depressed, people who are experiencing anxiety or PTSD, they don't have a super easy time leaving the house. And we wanted to make it something that was also more affordable and, just bringing it into people's homes. So we created KetaMD in a way that, first of all, there's an app. So I definitely recommend everybody go on the App Store and download the KetaMD app and learn about how we do the process. And if people are, a medical candidate for it, the app is going to pre-assess you. Then you have a consultation with a doctor. So we built this network of doctors who are trained in the ketamine protocols. And then you set up your series of sessions that are guided by a registered nurse. And we really wanted people to be guided over telemedicine by nurses because nurses just make everyone feel safe. And, there are certain medical aspects that need to be monitored. We also require that somebody is in the home with you, who's in communication with the nurse, just to make sure that everything is as safe as possible. Thankfully, ketamine is extremely safe. There are very, very rarely ever any side effects. It's the number one anesthetic used by oral surgeons on babies, because it's so safe. And we're using it in such a small dose just to create that neurogenesis and increase of dopamine and glutamate and a whole bunch of other cool things that ketamine does in the brain. So yeah, it was a really fun process where I could take my mindfulness training and my neuroscience research and my own personal psychedelic experiences and design how do you create the ideal psychedelic experience at home. And integration, of course, is an important part of that. So KetaMD also pairs our clients with a care concierge who's taking care of them every step of the way through the process. And then we support them with integration coaching afterwards so that they can really harness all the new benefits of this neuroplasticity and make the results last.
Right. That is super awesome. And I definitely love the fact that it's not, it's not just taking the drug, it's, the preparation, it's, the integration afterwards, and just harnessing that neuroplasticity that we've been talking about. And I saw it was featured, Lamar Odom did a KetaMD session. It was featured in the film that you worked on, or your film,
Yeah.
with Lamar Odom, and I just wanted to see if you could just touch on that briefly in terms of his experience, or just what you witnessed with that whole process of creating the documentary, why you felt it was important, and just kind of some of the biggest takeaways from that.
Yeah, for sure. So I mentioned Warren Gumpel and Zappy Zappelin. They actually, Zappy is a well-known director. Many people who follow psychedelics maybe saw his film, The Reality of Truth, which is one of the very first documentaries that came out about psychedelics. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it. It features Deepak Chopra, Michelle Rodriguez, Aubrey Marcus, Marianne Williamson, lots of thought leaders, and was really ahead of its time. And then he directed and Warren produced a documentary about Lamar Odom and his journey with psychedelic medicine to break his addiction. And I came in towards the end of that project as a post-production producer, and had the fortune of working with Lamar over the past couple of years to support him with his booster treatments. And, I can report he's doing really great. Most people remember, Lamar, famous basketball player, was married to Khloe Kardashian in 2015. He had a very public overdose and breakdown. He had 12 strokes and 6 heart attacks and was in a coma and was told that he would never walk or talk again. And even after that experience, he was still battling addiction. So it wasn't until he had a series of treatments with ketamine and Ibogaine, which I'd love to have a chance to speak about Ibogaine, actually, because I just came from an Ibogaine experience about a month ago. Highly recommend. So it wasn't until, Lamar was able to really break those brain patterns with the psychedelics that he was able to finally break his addiction and get on a path of really being healthy. And he has been able to sustain that now. He does his booster treatments every several months. Before KetamineMD launched, we were running an extensive beta trial. So he was part of that beta trial. And because he really credits psychedelic medicine, ketamine and KetamineMD, as helping to save his life. He is a huge advocate for this. And their documentary, Lamar Odom Reborn, chronicles his journey. It's very inspiring. It's very raw. You get to be like a fly on the wall and see him actually going through these experiences. So anyone, who's curious to see what that's about can check that out. And it's just been, very inspiring to see his recovery and see that he continues to be in recovery. Like he says, he has no desires to use it anymore. It's just gone. So these psychedelics really work.
Right. And it's awesome to see people, such as Lamar Odom, like be so transparent about them actually like getting a ton of help and potentially saving their life.
Yeah.
I saw another athlete recently in the news, Aaron Rodgers, credited
Yes.
an ayahuasca session for like having the best season in his NFL career. So
Yeah. It's so great to see, celebrities, athletes, like we need these people who are high profile to come through and share their stories to help break the stigma. So it is really wonderful to see more of them, coming forward and sharing their stories. You'd be surprised how many people over the past 5, 10 years even have been having psychedelic experiences. But I mean, even myself, since 2017, and I only like publicly started talking about it. I was bringing people to these experiences for years, but not talking about it because there was still this stigma. And now it's just really great to see that like almost every mainstream media outlet is talking about it, and more celebrities are talking about it, and the stigma is wiping away. The laws are changing. It's a very exciting time, for this medicine to come forward and really help people because, with these mental health conditions, with addiction, depression, PTSD, we don't have any other options that work. And these things really work.
Right. And one of the medicines you mentioned, Ibogaine, that's one I know about in terms of people are saying that it's incredible for people who are addicted to opioids, and it can just a single session can just break that habitual cycle.
Amazing.
So what can you tell me about Ibogaine and how it differs maybe from some of the other compounds we've talked about?
Yeah, I was really curious about that myself. So, I don't consider that I'm battling any addictions, but I went and had an Ibogaine experience down in Mexico at a week-long program because I wanted to know, how is Ibogaine different? What does Ibogaine do? So about a month ago, I did that. And Wow, Ibogaine's really my favorite. I definitely recommend it, not only if you're battling addiction, but just if you want a very, very complete reset. If for me, it was a much clearer experience than the ayahuasca. Ayahuasca can have lots of visions and, be very mystical and very cosmic and very beautiful and lots of purging. But with the Ibogaine, especially in a medical setting, like I experienced it at a place called Beyond in Cancun. They give you anti-nausea medication. You're in like a clinical setting. You're connected to an IV. You're being monitored by a doctor. So you're totally comfortable. You're not purging. You are having an internal experience where you're able to assess whatever it is that your intention is. And, it can be super beautiful. And again, like I mentioned, similar to others, if you have past trauma, you might go through that trauma again, or you might see the trauma from a different experience. But I mean, in my experience, it was very gentle, very beautiful, very loving. And I just came out with so much clarity and like no questions left unanswered, which is a little bit different than some of my other psychedelic experiences where I came out like, wow, that was really profound, but there's a lot of stuff I don't totally understand. I think also, taking the time to do it like a whole week, the way they do it at Beyond, where I had my Ibogaine experience, you're being supported with therapy and with coaching and with all these like events every day, whether it's art therapy or yoga or breathing or Watsu massage and like really high frequency food, and just like having your whole self supported so that you can go through this experience. I think it's an important part of the process so that you get the full benefit, and then doing some integration coaching afterwards as well. Very, very important. But, my experience was great, but I was there with some people who were definitely battling addiction. Someone specifically who was coming off of heroin, and I was watching like as he was preparing for his experience, thinking, I don't know how this is going to work for this person. Like he was telling me, I'm not super familiar with heroin, but he was telling me the amount that he'd been using every day apparently was a very large amount. And I think what's really special about Ibogaine, as opposed to literally anything else in the world, is that it helps people detox from opiates without all the horrible side effects. And so they detox you, then you go into your treatment, and then there's like no withdrawals. And so then I saw him after his treatment, and he was like a completely different person. And I've heard from him since he's been home. He started a new job. He's like a great dad to his kids now. He's off heroin. So it's, to me, it's really miraculous. And I know that it creates like a very massive reset in the brain. I think it is probably the most powerful psychedelic of all of the compounds out there. It's based on an African shrub called Iboga, and Ibogaine is the isolated compound from this Iboga. I've tried Iboga as well, just like the raw root bark. I wanted to compare, and for me, the Ibogaine experience was definitely the best. Like I said, just like so clear, very comfortable physically, and I feel like I just got like a super brain upgrade from it.
That is an incredible experience, and that's
Yes.
I feel like it's so necessary in terms of the field of addiction. I mean, I worked at a rehab center for a couple years and just saw, I mean, some people were able to help, but there were so many people that ended up who you would never think, they left the facility. It seemed like they were going to be doing great, and then
Yeah.
you would hear about relapses, and so
Yeah.
just having psychedelics that could potentially help people long term, like Ibogaine. I know LSD was something that Bill W., the founder of AA, was originally like trying to get that involved in the program. So I think there's
Right. That's the
absolutely,
secret 13th step, right?
yeah,
They left that one out.
right. So there's absolutely a role for psychedelics in addiction. I think no question.
Yeah.
Um, so kind of touching on another psychedelic project of yours. So tell me about Psychoceutical.
Yes. So, this is a little bit of, I think, a controversial aspect among the psychedelic community is, what role does the pharmaceutical industry play in how these compounds will become available to the masses, especially as the laws change. And here's where I stand on it. I am all for healing and brain benefits and reaching as many people as possible. We have so many people suffering in this world right now, especially since the pandemic, with depression, anxiety, suicide rates have doubled, tripled. I mean, it's scary out there, you know, PTSD. If you are alive on earth right now and you don't have some version of PTSD, I would like to know what your secret is. But like, so many people are suffering. And these psychedelic compounds, there's still so much we don't even know about them. So I am all for research. I'm all for, you know, mission driven psychedelic medicine. And if that has to be delivered through the pharmaceutical industry and that is going to deliver brain benefits to help break people out of mental health suffering, I'm for it. And that's why I'm putting my support behind this company, Psychceutical. It is a, you know, we're involved in R&D to develop psychedelic medicines in anticipation of the laws changing. And what I find, why I chose to join this particular team, what I find really exciting about what they're doing, you know, they've assembled a world-class research team of researchers from top universities in the country. We've got Dr. Julian Bales from University of Chicago, Dr. Anish Tuteja from University of Michigan. Dr. Bales was played by Alec Baldwin in the movie Concussion, you know, for his discovery of CTE, traumatic brain injury in athletes. These guys are really dedicated to studying the brain and figuring out how we can change brain chemistry, brain function, you know, in ways that traditional pharmaceuticals haven't. And Psychceutical has some patents on delivery systems that were developed for traditional pharmaceuticals, that work for traditional pharmaceuticals, that they're bringing over to psychedelics. So in addition to developing our own psychedelic compounds, we're also in a, say, co-opetition form with other psychedelic medicine companies who can use Psychceuticals delivery methods to deliver their compounds in a much more effective way. So these patented delivery systems, one of them can deliver, or it's in research. So, you know, we're in clinical trials, so I can't say it does this for sure, but what we believe it does is deliver psychedelics in a way that eliminates the side effects. So we're talking no hallucinations, no effect on the liver or digestive system. The compounds just go directly to the brain and affect the brain chemistry in the way that we want to. This makes it accessible to children, to teens. I mean, I have two teenagers. I don't know about you guys out there, but teenagers are having a super hard time right now. The elderly, you know, people who don't want to have a psychedelic experience. It's not appropriate for everyone to have a massive psychedelic experience, but we want the brain benefits without the side effects. So that's one of the patents, you know, it does that kind of a delivery. And then the other one is really cool because it can stack multiple compounds together in this nano structure and then release each compound on a time release. So this can create a way of taking multiple synergistic compounds or, you know, microdosing in a super effective way. And again, encapsulated in a lipid structure so that it's protected against liver degradation, stomach and digestive effects, because some of these psychedelic compounds can, you know, be quite harsh on the system. So I'm just really impressed with the research that's happening, that Psychceutical is doing with this incredible team. I definitely, you know, recommend if folks are out there and want to follow along Psychceutical's social media channels and, you know, follow along on, you know, how this company is developing. We've got Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank, who's one of our advisors and investors. And I think this is just like definitely a company to watch.
That's, I mean, what you were mentioning towards the end in terms of kind of like stacking different psychedelic compounds. I mean, that's like a whole new area or just like thing that I just wonder in the future whether they'll find that, you know, stacking psilocybin and LSD or ketamine and Ibogaine, like, you know, just figuring out whether, you know, what the synergies are between these different compounds and being able to administrate them, you know, simultaneously and potentially get synergistic effects. I mean, that could be another game changer. So that's
Yeah.
super cool work that.
There's so much potential here. Really, we're just at the very, very baby beginning steps of this industry. There's so much to learn. And because these compounds have been on Schedule 1 with the DEA, we've been very limited in what we can even study. But Psychoceutical is working with a lab in Baltimore that has a special license from the DEA to do research and development with Schedule 1 compounds. So that is, really exciting because we can finally start to learn about things like which synergistic compounds, work together in harmony to create the best effects. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see so many exciting developments happening. So yeah, it's a really exciting time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't wait to see what ends up happening. And speaking of kind of like looking towards the future projects of yours, I know you mentioned a film that you're working on that's going to feature Dr. Joe Dispenza. I see Bruce Lipton. What can you tell me about that project?
Yeah, this is a project that is very near and dear to my heart, a total passion project. So, like I said, joy is my mission in life, spreading joy, feeling joy. And I think that psychedelics are a really wonderful gateway to reach it. But I'm also interested in going deeper and going beyond having to rely on an external compound to experience that. And learning about, well, what is it that we have within our own biology and our own whatever we are that's beyond biology, to access that, to harness the field that we're all part of, and to put ourselves in a frequency of joy. So I have been very, very fortunate to work with incredible luminaries and visionaries and idols and heroes of mine, like Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Greg Braden, Roland McCrathie from Heart Math Institute, Nassim Haramein, incredible quantum physicist who's just breaking through with amazing research about the nature of the universe. And I'm very honored to be producing and assistant directing a documentary that will be coming out next year. Working title is Frequency, the Future of Everything. And the concept is bringing forward, all of these visionaries to share this inspiring information about how we can tap into those healing skills that we all have within ourselves, to tap into the field, to change our own frequency, to create healing for ourselves without needing anything external. If anybody is familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, he teaches people these meditation techniques to basically put your brain in a state of theta waves, and to do this daily practice so that you are in like this heightened state of awareness, and you're able to change the field of your own reality because of the change that you're making in your brain. Interestingly, a state of theta waves is what a psychedelic experience induces as well. Most of these psychedelic compounds induce those same theta waves. And so, when I talked to Dr. Joe about, well, like, what do you think about psychedelics? He's like, yeah, but you don't need that. Like, you can create that same thing yourself. And those are the techniques that he's using. And I've been, really honored to be able to interview him about that. We also in the movie feature some frequency devices that are available and being used for health, for agriculture, for energy production. So these are new technologies that are, already exist, but not too many people know about them, that are harnessing quantum frequencies for healing, for for basically solving a lot of the world's biggest problems. So I hope that this movie will be really inspiring, and bring forward a lot of solutions, because I know, there's a lot of problems we can focus on. And I like to say the problems are big, but the solutions are bigger.
Well, I'll be super excited to tune into that once it comes out. So, Kaia, I have had an awesome time talking with you and learning about all the different projects in the psychedelic community that you're a part of. It's quite remarkable just how you're able to juggle all of these things. For people who want to find out more about your work, the Joy Plan, or any of these, KetamineMD, Psychoceutical, all of these projects, where would you direct them to?
Yeah, well, first of all, Toby, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation with you, and also, thank you for the work that you're doing, and with the brain mapping, and also just bringing these important conversations out for folks to enjoy. If folks want to connect with me, you can definitely check out my website, KaiaRoman.com, or any of my social media channels. I'm Kaia Roman author on Instagram and Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. And KetaMD, if you're interested in at-home ketamine treatment, please go to KetaMD.com, download the app. If you're interested in psychoceutical, want to follow along with what's happening in the psychedelic industry, check out psychoceutical.com or any of psychoceutical social media channels. And I love to hear from folks. If you're interested in the Joy Plan, you can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart, pretty much anywhere books are sold. It's available worldwide in Spanish and as an audiobook as well.
Perfect. Well, we'll include links to all those in the show
Thank
notes.
you.
Of course, of course. That's the least I could do. And all for all the listeners who enjoyed the episode today, definitely share it with a friend. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Also, sign up for our newsletter at neuroflex.com if you want to have the chance to win a complimentary brain map and initial neuromodulation session. If you're in the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area, we're going to be giving away a few complimentary sessions. So enter in if you register for the newsletter, you're automatically entered into that contest. So check that out at neuroflex.com. Kaia, again, I wanted to thank you so much for just taking the time and sharing all of your knowledge and expertise with us today. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much. Take care.